Hello, welcome to this evening's special event. I have my nephew back a year later. Last year, he was a hopeful for a politician, and this year, he's running for state representative for Windsor 4 district. So, Kyle, welcome. I'm so excited for you. Thank you for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about the platform that you're running on for state representative?
Of course. Yeah, so I'm running for state representative for the Windsor 4 district, one of 150 state representative districts in Vermont. I'm running as an independent on an affordability agenda. I'm pro working class, pro agriculture, trying to bridge that gap between rural voters and progressive voters to be the working class candidate. I'm running on affordable housing, so making housing affordable and available, running on tax reform, easing the tax burden felt by working people while increasing taxes on the rich who have the means to pay for taxes. That way we can still fund our schools, we can still fund our services, still have good social programs, but the working class doesn't have to feel the brunt of that. And we start to fix some of the inequalities in our tax system in Vermont. I'm also running on workers' rights, trying to bring more agriculture back to diversify our economy, focusing on outdoor recreation for three season outdoor recreation for the tourist towns that are feeling the effects of climate change from the lack of long ski seasons, and also running on land use reform. There's some statewide land use policies that are pretty controversial this year, so it's important to tackle those head on.
Do you want to get into some of what those controversies are?
Yeah, so when I was working at Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Planning Commission, Act 181 was first rolled out by the state government, by state legislature. And at the time, I noticed that it was written in a way that was quite vague and left some room for interpretation. It delegated some responsibility to the regional planning commissions and some responsibility to the Land Use Review Board, which is a state agency that oversees Act 250, the statewide land use regulations. And there's a multi-member board that was appointed by Governor Phil Scott. They were responsible for making what's called the Tier 3 map. So right now with Act 250, there was statewide, the same regulations were in place kind of regardless of where you were. Act 181, what it did is it made the Tier 1 exemption areas, basically saying that the towns can map out where to reduce the Act 250 restrictions to allow for more construction without the need for the prolonged permitting process from the state. You'd still have zoning, but you wouldn't have to go to the state. Tier 3, what that did is it was drawn not by the towns like Tier 1, but by the Land Use Review Board and said, okay, these are all the restriction areas. So it was imposing additional restrictions on rural development. And the way they mapped it is they mapped it along a lot of major roads, which were just so happened to be in mapped habitat blocks. But in Vermont, especially in rural Vermont, most of the entire countryside is a mapped habitat block of some capacity. So in many towns, the entire town was drawn into a restrictive zone without the input of the town. And Pomfret, Barnard, Bridgewater were really negatively affected by that. Luckily, the legislature repealed the Tier 3 and the road rule, but there are talks of, you know, rewriting them and making them better, which for me would be, protecting your wetlands, protecting your ridge lines, the high elevations and the steep slopes, and the most important wildlife connector. Like there's probably one in our entire region that's potentially that important, but leaving the rest of the forest, I mean, in how it is now, basically. Act 250 works now, so we don't need to change it in the rural areas, I don't think.
Right. And it's great because you have a background in zoning and planning, and so you understand what the legislative, like what the law means practically, where it's not just an abstract like um so it's great that you understand the importance of the wording of policy and that a lot of times it seems like politicians just throw everything into uh, a policy and they don't think about how it's going to be implemented. And you know how to implement what you would write in the policy, basically, in the legislative law.
Right. I focused on land use law and grad school, and I've worked in planning and zoning for past few years. So uh, definitely can see how policy hits the road, how it affects people in their day-to-day lives. And part of the time at Two Rivers, part of my frustration was that I was hoping that the policy would be written better, but the only way to fix it is to get lawmakers in there who actually care enough to fix it.
Exactly. And that's you. You care enough to fix it and you understand it because you are trying to work within that law and that policy and you're like, this just isn't working. It doesn't make sense. Like it doesn't and I know that working for government agencies in Arizona, what they write in policy doesn't necessarily translate into something that makes sense on how to implement it. And it's like, what are these people thinking? Like they're so devoid from the real world applications of these policies. And I love the fact that you have a background in trying to implement these policies so you understand in a way that a lot of politicians don't, and they just don't care to. They're like, it's my job to pass these policies and just keep adding laws and regulations because that's what I'm getting paid for without stopping and thinking about the consequences. So you are independent. How does that affect your ability to campaign and run in the state of Vermont?
So right now in the race, there are only two other candidates, and the primary was yesterday. There wasn't a substantial write-in campaign for any Republicans. So right now it's the Democrat who was appointed by Phil Scott to fill a seat. The incumbent resigned over personal reasons, and Phil Scott appointed the sitting member. And then there's me as an independent, and then there is another third party who jumped in the race, the Peace and Justice Party. So they're what is it in Vermont? They used to be the Liberty Union Party. Bernie Sanders was a member of the party. They're
Okay.
solidly on the left, but they typically don't have a strong ground game for campaigning and kind of rely on the central messaging of the campaign. So we'll have to see how many votes they pick up. So that's kind of the wild card in the race to see how the Peace and Justice Party does. I know that as an independent and in talking with people, a lot of people appreciate that I am an independent.
Yeah.
Uh, from people from all over, from all the towns, from all walks of life, from all political identities, seem to appreciate that I'm not part of the two-party system.
Yes.
And it's interesting because I mean the Progressive Party, I've met with them as well, and they liked what I had to say, and I know that the people who want me to run as a Democrat in the primary and said I'd have a better shot running as a Democrat. But I really believe that running as an independent is actually the most true to myself, but also the most true to the moment. And people are just really fed up with the parties and they just want real people who actually want to represent them. And, I want to represent the people of this district, not a party. So I think that's a really good argument to make. And I believe that in this moment that there is a really good shot in this specific district, in this specific race. If it was a three-way race with a Republican and a Democrat, people are going to vote strategically. But
Right.
the absence of there's only one major party, and there's two, independent or third party candidates. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that goes.
So do you know how you did on the primary yesterday?
So as an independent, you don't have to win a primary
Okay.
automatically in the general election. I received a couple write-in votes. I didn't campaign on a write-in campaign,
Oh,
but some people still wrote me in, which
yay. Thank you.
um, but I was trying to not campaign too much before the primary, just to not confuse people about when they'll see my name on the ballot. Um,
Okay. So when will they get to see your name on the ballot?
November 3rd, 2026.
So everybody go out and vote if you live in Windsor, Windsor
Yes.
County. I'm just so excited for you and I'm just so proud of you. And as an independent myself, like I'm just so happy that you're running as an independent. I love that you want to support Vermont farmers, homesteaders, and working class. You have some great policy ideas on taxing the wealthy. But I just had some questions. How did you come up with the like numbers and the amount to tax people who make over, you have over 312 K a year? How did you come up with that number?
So looking at the tax brackets that exist, I'm fairly certain it was Amanda Janeau who won the primary for governor yesterday. She made a post about how people earning over, I think it was that 312,000 a year number, there aren't additional tax brackets above that point. And since that's a discussion that was happening kind of statewide on more of the let's actually tax the rich side of things, that's the number that kept coming up in posts. So I wanted to be relevant and kind of see, okay, this is where there's a shortcoming in the income tax. We need to make sure that people earning more than that are still paying their fair share in the system.
Definitely. Okay. I was like 312,000. I'm like, that seems like such an arbitrary number. And then, and why only have a new capital gains tax for individuals with a net worth over 10 million rather than say like 2 million or 5 million? Like, how did you come up with the 10 million?
Same thing as 312. That's what's been discussed statewide. So I want to make sure that when I am, if I'm elected in Montpelier, that I understand what the discussion's already been around, so we can get some wins and then try to go from there. But
Yeah,
to try to get the wins when we can get them when it comes to having the rich pay their fair share, so that working people don't have to have another tax hike to pay for our schools or roads or whatever.
yeah. Because the Vermonters, the true Vermonters, the ones who don't have their second and third in their uh rental homes and their rental properties, are struggling. I mean,
Right.
that's a big reason why I moved out of Vermont. It's the reason like your friends have all left Vermont and your friends have the potential to make really good money, but they all had to leave Vermont. And Vermont is just so unaffordable. It's like, who can even afford to live there unless you live in the city? When I say the city, just for people who are watching from Phoenix or New Mexico, it's New York City, where they're making millions and they can buy their, second, third, fourth, fifth homes in Vermont, but then it prices everyday working people and farmers out. So yeah, it's really frustrating. It's like Vermont relies on them spending the money, but it prices out normal people. I love your policy to ban AI data centers and flock cameras. But I had a question because I was just researching this because
Mhm.
Roswell just barely last week put up, I think it's like 30 or 40 flock cameras in town. Now, Roswell's a very small town. There's only 48,000 people and like uh, you know, in the town and, outside, like that's a very generous number too. Like that's maybe let's just say it's being generous, right? Roswell's a very small town. So to have 30 or 40 flock cameras seems excessive. But yeah, I was researching it and I thought that flock cameras were already banned in Vermont.
There are flock cameras in Vermont.
There are. What? Because when I
Yeah,
went to the like website to look it up, it said that there was only one county, and that was in southern Vermont, and they had to dismantle it.
I mean, maybe it's changed in the past and very, very recently, and I could be a little behind the times on that. But that was part of the legislation that Phil Scott vetoed, which would have put additional regulations on AI and the construction of data centers. Phil Scott vetoed that, even though it had bipartisan support. And there was
Why
a
did he veto it? That's like so annoying. Vermont does not need data centers. My philosophy, my theory is I didn't realize that Lowell, Massachusetts had a data center. I think that most of the drought issues that all of the Upper Valley and like Vermont and New Hampshire have been dealing with is due to that data center in Lowell, Massachusetts. I feel like that data center is sucking water from the whole area, the whole region, and is causing all the drought that y'all have been having the last few years. Now, do you know when that data center went up?
I'm not sure. Definitely the data center discussion was under the radar for many years until very recently. So I should have been paying more attention to it. Past couple of years or so is when I started paying attention. And I didn't realize how large these data centers were and how much water they were using.
It's
I've
a
always
environmentalist nightmare. It's a
it is
nightmare.
your water, your air quality, your ground, it pollutes everything. It affects animals and humans living
The noise pollution is
anywhere near it.
ridiculous.
Um, Electricity, it taps into the public utilities and then spikes prices for everyone else. There aren't many jobs provided. If anything, it leads to more job loss because of the use of AI and other sectors. And also, there's the debate of, what are they actually used for? And
Exactly.
that's also a problem is the surveillance state.
Yeah.
So
It seems like the data centers are actually more connected to the flock cameras than they are to AI. And
correct.
um, I do think it's a way to surveil the people um, in a very unethical 1984 kind of way. Um, and growing up in Vermont, like I would think that most Vermonters would be anti-data center and anti-AI and anti-flock cameras because Vermonters are all about their privacy. They're all about, live and let live, mind your own business, keep to yourself. So the fact that politicians are even thinking about allowing this stuff in the state or have allowed it in the past, just like my mind went because it's so against everything that Vermont stands for.
I agree. It's crazy that it's even a potential that we'd have a data center in Vermont and that Phil Scott vetoed a bill which would have put additional protections in place. People I've spoken to uh, usually think that Act 250 would prevent data centers and that an additional bill would be redundant. But I have to explain at that point that all Act 250 does is delay. It's very few things actually get thrown out by Act 250 because if you have enough money and have enough lawyers and enough time, you can kind of wait out the process and eventually get a permit for something. So even with Act 250, a small data center going in, let's say, the old nuclear plant in Vernon, south of Brattleboro, uh, Vermont Yankee, the nuclear plant, that site is what's been discussed as potentially being maybe a data center in the future. If any place in Vermont, it would be there. So Act 250 would fight it, but it doesn't mean it
Would be
the
banned.
people would win. The data
Yeah.
centers have so much money that enough lawyers that they'd find enough loopholes. They'd wait enough years and then get it in, and then that'd be that.
Yeah.
So, or the
Yeah.
towns that don't have zoning at all, and all of you have Act 250 in the Northeast Kingdom. These towns without zoning, if the state fails and the town doesn't have anything to protect it, you're going to have an AI data center going up in Orleans or St. Johnsbury or you know, somewhere near Lake Willoughby or Island Pond where there's water, or I'm from Magog up in Newport. I could see it going to any of those towns that
Come on, Vermont, get your shit together.
we need to
Ban
protect
that stuff.
now.
Huh?
Yeah, we need to protect it now
Yes,
before
now.
it's too late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get your shit together, ban this crap. I have no faith and no hope in people from New Mexico banning it. They're talking about data centers here in Roswell, and of course they're talking about building that, big ones in Phoenix and Nevada and Utah. And it's just like, this is the freaking desert. Like, are you like, what is wrong with these billionaires? What is wrong with them? Like, they are so mentally sociopathic,
Yeah.
they have no regard for human life, animal life, nature, the future. It's so sick. And it just makes me so mad. And I'm like, where can we go in the world to escape their insanity?
They've built bunkers to escape everyone else once everything hits the fan.
Yeah,
So
they have their bunkers, and they want to go off planet to Mars, well, and let the rest of us burn. But
yeah, it's scary. It's definitely, I mean, it's a bipartisan issue. You got people on both sides agree with it who are voters, but then you can see Democratic governors and Republican governors both veto efforts to ban them. The only state that I know of that's been successful is New York,
oh,
where Kathy Hochul actually passed a moratorium on data centers for, I think it was a year. But
okay,
still, that's better than
yeah.
Michigan. That's better than uh, Vermont. That's better than Maine. That's better than all these other states that the governors went against the will of the people in the legislature.
And that's usually what they do because they've been bought out. They're sorry to say it, y'all, like they're all corrupt.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't want me to say that because you want to work with them, but I can edit
I
that.
mean, I believe that the two-party system is corrupt and it's a broken system and doesn't represent the people. So,
It is a broken system, yeah. Yeah, and that's what we talked about in the last one was that, the two-party system is totally broken, absolutely 1,000% corrupt. Everybody's in the pockets of the billionaires, and they're not working for us, and that's the problem.
right,
They work for us, they don't work for the billionaires, but it's been inverted that they work for the billionaires and they don't work for us. They ignore what the people vote for. They ignore what the people ask for. We shouldn't be debating universal health care. Like,
right,
pass it. We shouldn't be debating, we shouldn't be taking funding away from Head Start and pre-K and kindergarten. Like, no, we need schools, we need education. That's where the funding should go rather than overseas, for things that we should just mind our business about. But so then you have something about you oppose electric vehicle mandates. I was
mm.
kind of surprised by that. So is there a mandate in particular you were thinking of?
So I'm leaning towards. I think that it was paused or overturned, but there was for a time on the books a mandate that all new gas cars would be banned from sale in Vermont in 2035, which at this point, the technology is not there for electric vehicles to be affordable and widespread in Vermont.
Right.
The infrastructure is not there. The roads aren't there. There's a lot of, you could easily drive from town to town in Vermont without any charging stations, and there is no way that that's possible if we only have electric cars as an option, and the price is still too high. So for a lot of working people, you're not going to be able to afford an electric car to do everything with. And for people who work with trucks, EV trucks are not there yet to where you can tow heavy loads and not sap your battery without going more than 50 miles. Like there's people who drive for an hour and a half to commute one
Yeah.
way, and that's half the state.
And how do the batteries hold up in freezing weather?
Not very well. I had a friend who had a Tesla that she got stranded on the highway.
Yeah.
So
It's just not practical in
yeah,
Vermont to have electric cars.
in certain areas like in Burlington, it would make sense. And around here, if you commute to Leb and it's like, you're driving 20 minutes one way in the summer, okay, that makes sense. But
Yeah,
I'd rather,
but not in the winter, not when
no,
it's
not in the winter. You will have the heat on, the heated seats, full blast, the wipers. You'll have more resistance on the road, and your range of 300 miles will become 100
Yeah.
real fast. Um,
Yeah, Vermont's infrastructure is just not set up for it. And then you wrote that report back in high school about how, electric cars are not actually better for the environment. Those batteries are actually worse.
they
So,
are.
what is the point of just making electric cars available? It's not really doing anything for the environment. Truly, the best thing we can do for our environment and for climate change is to ban data centers, ban AI, ban flock cameras,
Right.
ban government overreach, tax the rich.
Right. Right. I mean, there's been a lot more pollution in the war in Iran than people driving gas cars in Vermont.
Absolutely.
So, you know, we can solve a lot of the issues of climate change and the carbon emissions by going to the main source, which is war and mass industrialization and the producers and not the consumers. The average working people should have to foot the bill for an issue they didn't even create. So
And that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing with these data centers. And, it's such a rigged system. And I swear, every month I think it can't get worse and something new comes out. And I'm like, this is the worst absolute timeline that we could absolutely be on. Like,
yeah, I keep going back to if Bernie won in 2016, how would we be today? It'd be a much better place. I
we
hope.
would be in, I mean, it wouldn't be utopia, right? But it
No,
would be so much better. And I don't know. I'm really sad to hear that, Vermont's governors are kind of corrupt because I literally had it in my mind that Vermont was fighting the good fight and that Vermont like is this utopia. It's the place to go if you don't want to get caught up in the surveillance state. And I was ready to move back.
yeah, it's luckily we don't have a lot of big towns, so there wouldn't be many of those flock cameras around. But between River Junction and Woodstock and Burlington and the larger towns, it would definitely affect enough people, and you'd have to go there eventually. Like you're not escaping it. You live out
Exactly.
in the country.
It's true. You had something about Act 73. Can you explain to people what Act 73 is?
Yes, Act 73 was forced through by Governor Phil Scott to force school consolidation. His answer to saving people money was by closing schools, which would only increase other costs like transportation. It would increase the burden on the remaining schools. It would fire a bunch of teachers. We'd have fewer teachers with more students, more transportation. You wouldn't tackle the administrative costs, they'd still be there. And again, it's all forced without the input of towns. So you're taking away the local autonomy and you're having a state led initiative saying, sorry, you're too small. You're going to go every which way now. In Woodstock, that would be detrimental. There's students in Bridgewater and Woodstock that would have to drive up to an hour to get to school if Woodstock didn't have a high school. So it's really important to focus on, again, the local control, but also to have the school within half an hour of where you live with a long, like within half an hour, so that students don't have a long commute to school, because that's one of the hardest things as a student when you're young. You hate waking up in the morning as it is.
Yeah.
Uh, Now imagine having to double your commute to school, and then as a parent, when your children are even further away from home or where you work, if something happens, then that's going to even make it harder for you to pick them up from school.
Yeah.
Uh, they weren't thinking about the human costs, uh, and it wouldn't even save them much money because the real cost is in administration and healthcare in the state. So
And again, they never think about the human costs, the everyday costs, are the costs on their civilians, their populations. They only think about their own. And it's like, well, then why do we pay taxes? We pay taxes so we have these things. It's not for our taxes to just benefit. corporations and millionaires and billionaires, it's for the people, it's for the community. And Vermonters really love their community and are very active. And so it's just really, really sad to see that, I mean, are town halls even a thing anymore? Do they still do that, or have they kind of, lost that too?
Some towns have still have town meeting day. Some towns have them on different days of the week. It's not always on a Tuesday. And some towns like Pomfret don't even have a town meeting day
But
anymore.
right. So
So
that's really sad because, that's what made politics in Vermont, I feel like, so special was that they had town halls, they had town meetings. Uh, People felt like they had a voice. They felt like they could speak up. And it feels like just another way to strip away our rights as citizens. It's like keep paying, keep paying, keep paying, but we're gonna take away more and more and more from you.